So our next guest is a master in mindset and psychology, and I am super, super excited to welcome him to the show. Ryan, welcome to the show. No, me too, me too. I mean, we had a great pre-call, and I was in the mindset that I had so many questions at that time to ask you, so we're just going to go with the flow, but what I really wanted to start with was motivation. So for me, for example, I just completed a 50-mile race. And while that was on the calendar, I had 10 weeks to train and I was training pretty hard for it. But now that it's over, I'm like, okay, well, I'll have my good 2 weeks off and do active recovery. But now what? So in terms of after a big challenge, how do we stay motivated for the next one or something that's not yet in the calendar?
This is something that I end up speaking to athletes about, as you've mentioned there, leading up to that kind of significant endurance event. Congratulations for getting through that one.
Thanks.
But we speak about kind of prepping beyond the event before you've even got up to that start line, got in the pool, on the court, on the pitch. It's having those threads that run through that, of course, you're going to want to deliver best performance in that event. But it's having them conversations to go, and what does that week or 2 weeks look like? Fantastic, you've given yourself that rest, that break away from running, from the sport. But it's being active in prep for, right, this is what I'm going to do on this day. The same as you would with your training leading up to it. You're going to know how far you need to run certain days, when you're going to train morning, evening, afternoon. Sometimes for big events, it's prepping. All right, so what does the Monday after that competition look like? What am I going to do? Can I be kind of really proactive and planned with that, rather than going, oh, I'm going to have a rest day? Well, what am I going to do for that rest day? When am I going to eat? Does my nutrition look different now? Maybe you can splash out a little bit on meals because you've got that freedom having just performed. It's being intentional with that. And as you asked there, it's then working out when's appropriate to get back into it. When do you feel like you can mentally and physically? And what shape does that take? Is it that you're now building up for another competition? Or is it that it just drops into kind of general background training? Just to get back into it, get the legs moving again, get the brain thinking, and kind of overcoming that really taxing, fatiguing event that you just faced. Thinking, what's next? And that ultimately is the motivation within performances and for performances. I spend a lot of my time speaking to athletes about that. What next? What's next? What's the next action? What's the next thing you're going to do? Whether that's concentration or motivation.
What's the difference between elites and, say, a regular dad like me?
I think there were similarities in asking that question. You're going to get different responses based on the environments, the demands that they have, the pressures that they have upon themselves. In conversations with elite athletes, it's more likely they're going to know or have an idea about what the next thing in the calendar is. Where it may take a little bit more sitting down and searching, kind of with respect to yourself. If you're kind of sat just thinking, well, what's next for me as a sport parent, or as a more of a recreational athlete, that's respectful to the endurance events that you do, if we can call them recreational.
Like, what if I don't know what's next? Or maybe I don't want to do another ultra. How am I going to get back into something? What should I do?
So this is where we delve a little bit deeper. Kind of motivation's fantastic to get us thinking about what we want to do. The differentiator between motivation and commitment is that motivation is that intention. I'd love to go to the gym. I'd love to do this race. Really want to spend more time with my child, my children. It's a thought. It's an idea. The commitment is the bit that actually makes you do something because of that purpose. You've got to have a reason why you're going to do that. With the best will in the world, I can sit here really wanting to do a 50-mile run. I've got brilliant motivation to do that. It doesn't mean that I'm going to go out, put my running trainers on and go out this afternoon or tomorrow or next month. It's the commitment to it. It's that determination to actually do something and go, no, I'm going to start tomorrow. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to plan for that. I'm going to protect that time. the way that I've spoke to athletes and students previous is that the motivation might get you to the gym door. The commitment will actually make you push through the door and go and do the session. Because up until that point, It's just an idea. It's just something that you'd like to do. Again, you asked if you've lost a little bit of that purpose, if you've lost a little bit of that commitment, you're questioning where do I go from here? What do I want to do? It's the deeper questions of what are your values? What do you want to get out of it? And what are your central foundations for who you are as a person? There's always a reason why you do something. There'll be reasons not to turn it into a consultancy session, but no doubt there'll have been reasons why you wanted to do the 50-mile run. Having accomplished that, is it that we've met that need? Is it that there's a need to be active? Maybe as one of your values to get out there, be out in the outdoors. Is it that it's there for a bit of me time? When you're out running, it kind of just provides a rest almost mentally to go, I'm just going to go and clock up the miles and I'm not going to get bothered by all them work emails and all that stress. There's always a reason behind what we do, and it's finding that reason and those values that are centered to you to then work out what shape that activity then takes, that next action, to work out what that actually is.
I think you put the nail on the head there, where it's to be active, firstly, but also I made a commitment to the ultra dads and said I'd do 10 weeks of training and then do 50 miles. So I guess that was part of the commitment. So I'd like to just dive a little bit deeper here. I have a thing called stakes, and it was coined by Tim Ferriss, where you have to put stakes in front of something. So it could be the opportunity to lose something. Mm-hmm. And in this case, I put my ego at stake and put it in front of 116 dads or something. But a friend of mine, say, if he didn't do a training, he'd give me £5. So that was his stakes if he didn't make the session. Can you tell me a little bit about that and why that might be important, or what other strategies like having stakes would get us across the motivation line into the commitment zone?
Yeah, so what you're speaking about in regards to stakes there, which I love the terminology there. For my terminology would probably come across as consequences. There's a consequence for doing or not doing that action. There's an impact of that, which, as you've mentioned there, just helps you be accountable. It's like you say, we can say, oh, I'm going to do this training program, but if we don't tell anyone about it, if we then decide to stay in bed rather than getting up, no one knows that we haven't done it. Yeah, we know, but we can brush it off. We can talk ourselves out of it really easy. Whereas, as you mentioned there, if there's a consequence, if it's that I know that I don't get up very well on a morning, and that's really when running fits in, for example. If I know that one of my friends, colleagues are going to be at the street corner and we're going to run together, then all of a sudden I've got more of a commitment to get up and out that morning to go meet them. There's an impact for what action I decide to do or not do. I'm not going to let them down. So therefore, suddenly that drive to get to the corner to go out and run potentially becomes a really easy decision. It might be difficult getting out of bed when you're nice and warm and cozy. But it becomes a little bit of an easier decision. And sometimes it's just tipping the balance that helps us stay motivated and committed. In the early days of trying to get into training, for example, it just helps tip that balance until we become a little bit more consistent, frequent with it. Then we start building up this evidence that, well, I've done 10 sessions and I have my plan. Of course, I'm going to do session 11. And that's where we start creating habits then, because it almost becomes harder to talk ourselves out of something that we've regularly done. We're starting to build that trend, that streak. As you mentioned, there's different stakes that we can utilize. I'm always cautious, based on what you've mentioned, that for how much of the external consequences we put in. So you mentioned kind of the financial aspect of not doing something. I always think it's really important to have that internal kind of expectation, those internal markers, stakes. just holding yourself accountable rather than, say, being reliant on someone else. Again, internalize it as well. What am I doing it for? Kind of what's the benefit to me from a performance, from a fitness, from a competitive perspective, rather than, say, relying on someone else to be the driver of that, or something else to be the driver of that. There's a difference between, I'm going to do this action because if I don't, it's going to cost me £5, versus I'm going to be active today because that's part of who I am. It's part of my self-care. It's part of who I want to be. That's sometimes can be significantly more powerful than that financial consequence.
So what I've always grappled with is I always wanted to be a rugby player, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this might go into the identity thing. When I left rugby, it's been very hard to leave rugby, so I've been back and forth a couple of times. But afterwards, I thought, am I no longer that identity? And I did all that training. What now? Like, what's happening at that point when maybe I struggled for a little bit. I didn't really go to the gym as much, whereas previously I might have been at the gym twice a day. Mm-hmm. What's happening there for me, in your opinion?
Yeah, so you mentioned the key word here, which is identity. It's this idea of that you are a person, but there are a lot of roles that you fulfill. There are a lot of ways that you embody who you are. So as you said, being a rugby player is a significant part of who you are. If that becomes the sole identity that you have, that you base your self-worth on, and whether through retirement, through injury, through kind of contracts ending, not being renewed, you come out of that sport, that's your sole identity. If all your self-worth is tied into being that thing, and all of a sudden you're not, you get left in that kind of limbo where you're questioning, well, who am I? I've worked so hard to be this person, this role, this identity, and it's been taken away. And I don't know who I am anymore, because all my life has been centered around that. Again, when we speak with athletes, whether youth, whether kind of the elite senior end, it's having conversations that, of course, it's their sport, who they are, is going to be central to them. They are going to have a significant identity attached to being an athlete, because we can't get away. It's what they're living and doing day in, day out. But it's also fleshing out that identity to say, okay, so we've got that as one role. What are the other roles that you play in life that provide you self-worth, that provide you fulfillment and satisfaction? That might be, as we're speaking relevant here, of being a father. That now becomes part of my identity. It's part of your identity. It's part of a lot of people's identity who are listening to us speak today. Yeah, I'm a psychologist. I enjoy kind of running. That's part of my identity, but I'm also a father. So suddenly I have 3 or 4 parts of me that give me self-worth, that provide value. And I know I can give value through doing those roles as well. And that just helps that if suddenly one of them gets taken away, if I'm no longer a sports psychologist, I still know that I've got value in my other roles, rather than going back to your original example, having that rugby player identity taken away, and you going, well, how do I provide a worth to anyone? What's my value if everything was tied up into just being a player, just being an athlete? So that's why it's really important to have these beyond sport conversations. Ideally, we look for people to have between 4 and 6 identities or roles that they play in life when we're speaking to athletes, when we're speaking to people. Kind of lower than 4 becomes a little bit fragile, as we mentioned. You're almost putting too many eggs in one basket. More than 6 becomes just physically and mentally taxing to try and keep all these plates spinning. So again, people will vary, but typically between 4 and 6 that we aim for, just so you know you've got a real strength platform, that if one gets taken away, i.e. if your contract doesn't get renewed, or you're injured if you're an athlete, you've still got something else that you can do. You can still provide work in a different format. And that's really key when we're speaking about identity.
So how can a regular dad that may not have played professional sport develop that and those identities? And then the second part of the question is, how do we connect that to fitness so that we're not completely blown out and we're being the best dad that we can be?
Yeah, I think, well, to answer the first part of your question, we've already got one of those identities in being a father. I imagine people will have different careers. They will provide a different role, a different identity as part of that as well. Kind of moving on to that second part, you mentioned that being physically active, exercising. Again, that can be a key role. But you can get creative with them as well. So literally one of them might be being creative. It could be part of one of your roles that fit under your identity of wanting to read, paint, be arty. That could be part of it. It doesn't have to be just like a job or an official title. It can be a little bit of personality attributes and characteristics as well that form part of this identity. Really, what we're doing is we're fleshing out who you are as an individual, so that we're not pinning all your hopes, all your worth, just on one role, one set of kind of performance metrics that you perform in, and that's whether you're an athlete or whether it's how well you navigated that conversation with your child, how well you communicated. Did you set time aside for them? They're all still performance metrics away from being an athlete, because you will know whether you've had a good day or not in regards to how you performed.
Okay, so as a dad, how can I use that to benefit my kids?
The deeper dive on, if we're linking identity to kind of this development, this progression, it's understanding the roles, which is what we've spoke about to this point. But then it's working out, what does success look like within that role? So what does performance look like? Exactly the same that I would do with an athlete. They know what a good game and a bad game looks like. They have different performance kind of key targets that sit within that they base that feel of, have I done well? Have I done what I wanted? What's the areas for improvement? That would be exactly what I would map onto your question of kind of being a sport parent, being a sport dad. Then say, right, what does, in your perspective, what does being a good parent look like in and around sport? How do you want to behave? How do you want to interact? And then again, having that self-awareness, that time to actually think about, did I do what I wanted to? But not only what I wanted to, did I have that conversation with my child to find out what they wanted? And did I perform in the way that they were wanting me to in that situation? Because that could look completely different from how you would like to do it. And it's asking that bigger question of saying, who's more important? Is it what you would like to do as a parent, or is it actually what your child would like from you? I place the emphasis on the latter, really.
So you've worked with some top athletes and also top young people. I'm curious about being a parent here, and what's a good parent and what's a bad parent. And obviously I want my child to be a professional athlete. That's a pipe dream, so I can follow the summer instead of the winter like rugby. But what is a good parent and bad parent when it comes to, say, mindset and helping our children in sport?
Yeah, so let's navigate this question and answer carefully. I'm not going to sit here and critique anyone's parenting styles. I'm not going to come up with a gold standard of, these are the actions that you should definitely do as a parent, and this is what makes you a failure or your child a success. Like, I'm not in that position. No, are we trying to do that? The important way I can emphasize this is linked to what I mentioned about that self-awareness, about catching yourself when you feel like your behaviours, your communication aren't as effective as they could be. Is it who you would like to be as a parent? Kind of, is that how you're acting? Is it that if you heard yourself back, you would cringe in saying what you just said or acting how you just did? And as I mentioned, it's having that open communication, I think, is central. If we do step into that how-to guide, being a really excellent sport parent, the centre part of it would be having that open communication line with your child, with the performer, to ask, what would you like from me, and how would you like it to come in? and being open as a parent to know that the answer that you get back might not be what you would like to do. It might be that in certain moments your child turns around and goes, just leave me alone, don't say anything, don't come. And it's been vulnerable enough and open enough as a parent to go, I'm going to put my child's wishes before my own, even if I'd like to be there. It's what they would like. They're the performer. And by me being there, that actually might have a negative impact if they have the awareness that they don't want me there for a reason. It's respecting that decision. I think that would come into what that excellent sport parent looks like. It's just communication. And one of the key parts that I always seem to come back to when having conversations about parents in sport, it's having the key reflective conversations after a performance. Sometimes we think about them as being like the in-car conversation, the journey home, when they've stepped out off a pitch, a pool, kind of off a court, and the first conversation they're going to have with you is going to be open and honest, and they're looking for how you thought it went as a parent. And the strongest bit I could add to here is, if people don't take anything else but this, is allowing your child to lead that conversation, allowing your child to lead that reflection. Because as a parent, you've just watched it. You would love to give your insight into what you've just seen. Your child looks up to you. You're a role model in their eyes, so they really want to hear your opinion. But as a parent, it's being aware to ask them first, well, how do you think it went? Allowing them to have that space to reflect, to discover, to really increase their self-awareness before you then comment as a parent, as an observer. Because naturally, as soon as you open your mouth as a parent, as I've said, they look up to you. If they were thinking about disagreeing with any of your points, that's out the window now. They're just going to see it from how you've seen it. And we lose some really valuable information that could have been shared. And it helps you as a parent to understand how your child's seeing the sport, seeing their performance, which you can then ask different questions on. You feel like it went really well and they feel it went horrible, where you can ask, well, why did you think it went badly? Like, what are you basing that on? Whereas if you'd opened your mouth first as a parent and said, yeah, it was brilliant, your child just goes, yeah, it was, wasn't it? Even if they don't really believe it. So that would be a real key foundation for what that excellent sport parent looks like, behaves like.
Okay, I think you answered this question, but I'm going to throw it in there anyway.
Okay.
Say there's 10 to 15-year-old male. He's a tennis player, and he's very good. Maybe been told he's good from a very young age, but now he's developing emotions, and in each game, he's starting to get aggressive, and maybe smashes his racket or hits the net, or you can hear him swearing.
Mm-hmm.
As a parent, it's not something that I would want to see my son doing. But as a parent, what could I do at that point? Is it ask him to reflect back, or is there something else to help him overcome that challenge?
Yeah, and I think this is where it's really important, because I can jump in and say what we would do from a psych perspective, but that's not the hat that parents are going to be wearing. And you could very quickly venture out of your depth, thinking you're doing good and potentially you're not. So as you alluded to just at the end there, I think the important bit that, of course, you're going to disagree. There is going to be a hard line kind of in the sand that you're not going to cross, and not going to tolerate certain behaviours as a parent in your child. So there is going to be a bit where you are going to be firm and go, that's disrespectful, for example, when you're not doing that. I think if we can navigate those emotions as adults and as parents, the valuable conversation there is trying to understand from your child's perspective about how we got to that point. So, okay, I saw the outburst of emotion. What was it that was building that emotion up? The likelihood is, if we speak to a 10-year-old, as you mentioned, kind of in that age bracket, they might go, I don't know. Right? So they might just completely, I just felt away and I acted, which, again, we accept that they're 10 all the way up to kind of 16, 17, they're going to act on instinct. But by asking the question, it might mean that next time, when that emotion comes up, they still act out in the way that they're going to. But it might mean that afterwards they think, where did that come from? And it allows them to capture themselves a little bit while they're still thinking about it. To go, oh, it was because that decision went against me. Oh, it was because I was frustrated with how I moved, how I performed. The game was against me, whatever it was. We don't change anything. The behaviour is exactly still the same. We're still not happy with where that behaviour is. But all of a sudden, we've got a little step along the journey that ultimately the child has increased their self-awareness. I know where it's coming from now. And if we know where it's coming from, then we can, again, speaking to different expertise, if it's sports psychologists, then fantastic. We can then deep dive into that further and then put progressive techniques in place to then benefit performance in the future. It's not going to be an overnight click of the fingers. Kind of you just stop doing it, because a lot of the time we're speaking on habits, we're speaking on things that people are reacting to automatically, and a lot of the time our work is about interrupting some of those processes and providing something more useful and more effective for performance. I speak about getting back to neutral. It's about getting back to neutral as quick as possible when something has happened.
Okay, what does that mean in terms of, is that a concept that you discussed with your child in terms of getting back to neutral, and you can go to gear 6 or in reverse? What does that conversation look like?
Yeah, so when I speak on getting back to neutral, it's that we're going to have highs and lows within performance, within days, within kind of weeks and months, and just different events. We're also going to have kind of significant lows that are going to be negative moments, that are going to be real substantial kind of negative emotions that we're going to feel. And that getting back to neutral just gives us a place to anchor to just press the reset button and go, right, let's take a pause, whether figuratively or literally, and just take a breath, take a pause. Let's just reset, and then let's work out what does the situation demand of me here. Doesn't mean that we have to be really, really nice in that. Doesn't mean that we can't then go at 100 miles an hour. Doesn't mean that we can't be aggressive within the demands of sport that require from us, because different sports require different things. But it just gives us an anchor point to go, something brilliant's just happened, fantastic. But if I stay really, really high, I might miss something in my performance because I'm getting carried away with excitement, adrenaline, etc. Or something negative's happened, a setback, kind of something interrupted the performance. Again, let's get back to neutral. Let's anchor back into this zone. And then I can, from there, decide where does the performance require me to go next? What does that concentration look like? It just gives us that concept to, as I keep saying, anchor ourselves to.
Okay, I've got millions of questions coming into my head right now.
It's fine, yeah, go for it.
Well, firstly, let's tackle this one, which is, okay, say the dad doesn't have a very good relationship with their son. Should he be the one delivering this? Especially, say, teenage boys, maybe there's a wise friend or something, or grandparent. Should they deliver this instead? Or can that relationship be built over this hurdle or obstacle together?
Yeah, so just for clarification, when you say this, are we speaking the support that is being delivered, being promoted here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the best place, if you've got that relationship, then fantastic. Obviously, it's a little bit simpler to embed the support directly. As I said, we're going to keep speaking on awareness throughout because it's a central part of performance and delivering support. I think that awareness is important here to understand, again, am I the best placed person to deliver this support? If you're unsure, again, hopefully you could have that conversation. Coming from a supportive, open perspective with your child to say, like, I'm going to come to this game, come to this performance. One, hopefully they are happy with that. And then second to that, asking them, what would you like of me? Is it that you just like me to be there? Just my presence is enough as just a demonstration of support? Is it that afterwards you would like me to provide some comment on how it went, what your performance was like? Is that you'd like me just to listen to what your thoughts were? It's, again, understanding what they would like from them. Sometimes it's, I've spoke to children and parents previous where sometimes the child just goes, just when I look over, just as long as you have a smile rather than a really stern face or a resting face, at least it makes me feel like I'm doing all right. And that's all they need. It's not necessarily like that thumbs up every single time, but just to be able to look over and just go, yeah, brilliant, they're watching, they're enjoying me go out and perform. That could be enough. People want different things, but it's having that conversation with your child, which in my past experience doesn't happen as much as I think I would have expected it to, where parents are actually speaking to their children about what their children want from them around sport and performance.
Next question then, how do I say pressure is something that we're all going to come up against, and it's something as you get higher up in the levels, especially for children or children athletes or promising child athletes, how do we develop that resilience in our child or children as a parent?
So kind of really importantly, resilience comes from numerous different aspects. One of them central to kind of confidence is coming from experience. So again, if you're attempting to develop resilience in your child, it's the reflective conversations, it's the reflective questions to remind them of situations that they faced and overcome previous. That evidence that proves to them that they can actually do this. It might be that they're facing a different challenge. It might be that the expectations are higher, that pressure is higher. As it ramps up, as you said, you get closer to senior, the pressure increases. But it's reminding them that they're actually capable of delivering a performance under some kind of pressure. And again, having that line with them to say, why would this be any different? If you can do it there, again, challenge them. Why could you not do it here? Let's deliver the best performance. Let's prep as well as we can to overcome. Let's expect that we can, because the other side of that would be thinking it's all going to go wrong, and that definitely will have an impact on performance, and it will be negative if you go in thinking it's going to go badly. It will. It's having that conversation and being that supportive parent to say, okay, we're here. We know what you can do. You go out and deliver the performance that you know is possible. The other parts of resilience, again, having them conversations when it goes badly and the performance hasn't been up to scratch. It's not doing a complete post-mortem, especially with younger athletes. We don't want to sit them down and show them 20 clips of exactly what they did wrong in regards to performance. But it's having those conversations to try and work out a little bit of where did it go wrong? Was it just the pressure? Did we lose focus? Maybe the prep wasn't as we would have wanted it to be. Maybe you didn't feel right. Kind of, did you eat what you usually eat before a performance? Did we sleep all right? Were we worried last night? We didn't get much sleep and therefore we were fatigued. And again, taking that forward, we can't do anything about that performance. That's come and gone now. But we can learn from it and we can take something forward. And there's no reason why we can't do that off a good performance as well. I think that's something that's critical to performance and development. It's being analytical and being reflective on good performance as well. It's not just highlighting what went wrong and fixing it. It's highlighting what went right and making sure that we consistently do that each time.
So the Olympics are coming up soon, and say there's some young youth athletes. What should we be thinking about? I'm not saying my children are at the Olympics or anything, but so what should those athletes be thinking about, or what are they doing to, one, cross that barrier into the next level, and then two, what if, say, they miss that important kick, or they miss that important hurdle, or they fall over during the 100-meter? Is it again reflection, or is there something different happening here?
So the important bit to emphasise, and what I've learned from the athletes that I've kind of been privileged to work with at kind of the top levels that have these life-defining, event-defining moments, is that we can't get away from the fact that there will be an outcome goal. It would be wrong of me to say that if they're in events where they could win a gold medal, that they don't want to win the gold medal. That is definitely one of their targets. But the important bit to emphasise is that there will be so much more that they are aiming for as well alongside that. That is similar to identity. We're not putting all our eggs in one basket. Yeah, absolute cherry on top of everything is that gold medal. But there will be targets that performers will set under that are process-based, that are performance-based, that link into PBs, that link into how they've executed performance, whether they're managed pre-comp nerves, will be success markers for athletes. That suddenly, that if they do trip and fall, as you mentioned, if something does go wrong, that it's not a complete catastrophe, that there are still elements we would like to think we could tick off that, yeah, the substantial things went wrong, but we still did some good elements that we can then build on, that we can then progress. If nothing else, the fallback on is always you were there. You actually achieved something by being there that not many people the world over have ever done, have ever had a chance of doing. So there's always success to be found within performance anyway. It looks different for different levels. But yeah, it's an important one to again not say that if they don't get the gold, of course they're going to be distraught. We're going to have negative emotions because they've worked so hard to put themselves in that position. But there's a realism to it that goes, a lot can happen within the 10 seconds of a 100-meter sprint. It doesn't sound very long, but a lot can happen, and in the milliseconds things can go right and wrong. So again, it's not placing all your self-worth on whether you come first or not. There is so much behind that protects an athlete's well-being, and subsequently the support team that go around them and their family. It's reminding them that, of course, we all want them to win, but we have success metrics beyond that too, of where we can get satisfaction in knowing that they've done the best that we possibly can to deliver a performance on that day. It's hard to remind yourself of that when opportunities might have been worked on for 8 years and they come down to 10 seconds. But it's important that we don't lose sight of that, because I think that, thinking to what you mentioned on resilience, I think that undermines that resilience level. We want people that can manage in high pressure situations and come back from setbacks. If we don't do the prep, if we don't put support in place prior to them performing, it gives them a real big challenge to actually come back after that. We haven't done the support kind of at the front end and been proactive with it.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about preparation then, because you've just touched on it there.
Mm-hmm.
What could I do, firstly, as a junior athlete and a parent for that junior athlete, and then also myself? Maybe they're the same thing in terms of preparation for an event.
So, great question. This is where we start spreading it across days and weeks. It isn't just that 6 hours before a performance. We can actually do things in the weeks leading up to it. No doubt for your 50-mile run, you'll have had a physical plan, you said, about 10 weeks. But how often are we thinking about it from a mental perspective? I'm not saying you have a 10-week mental plan. But again, it's giving weight to the fact that I'm doing all this prep from a physical perspective. Yeah, my brain's going to be having to think and negotiate and make decisions in the moment, in this performance. And I've spent 10 weeks on my body and I've done nothing with my mind. Again, it's a common conversation I have with people. It doesn't have to be as intensive as your 10 weeks of training, but it's throwing in, again, reflection on what did past performances look like? Were there mistakes made? How can I iron them out before the competition day? It's as we get closer, it's things like being organised. Do I know where I'm performing? I get to speak to athletes who perform in different countries. So it's the simple questions that sometimes go amiss when they're building up to a big performance. Have you actually got your flight tickets all printed out days ahead, so that last minute you're not fighting with the printer when it decides not to work? Can we just remove as much of the stresses as possible so that we minimize stress? We're not going to completely remove it. You're still going to be a little bit anxious leading up to the event, but we're not throwing extra stress events in. Like I said, the printer malfunctions for whatever reason and you've got a few hours before you have to be out the door. The question is, why did you not print the ticket 2 weeks ago? So again, it's getting athletes to think, brilliant, what's the prep I need to do? We shouldn't be kind of running around the night before a competition or a performance, going, where's my kit? Where are my shin pads? Where are my boots? Where are my running trainers? It should be done. We should just get into the habits of just being prepared. When I'm going to take the performance seriously, I'm just going to pack my bag a few days out, because then I know it's there. I've taken one thing off my checklist. It's done. All of a sudden, I feel a little bit more free, feel a little bit calmer, feel prepared. Mentally, it starts getting us switched on to building up to a performance. So I'm starting to think now of what my expectations are for my performance. Maybe starting to, as I said, get a little bit of that nerves, get a bit of that excitement, which is completely fine because you're doing something that you care about. We'd expect you to be anxious and excited. But again, it's just doing little bits like that, not going too deep. We can go really deep on prep routines and things like that. But some of the times it's just these little markers that just go, let's just remove as much stress as we can and plan for as much as we possibly can expect. There'll be curveballs, so let's just try and manage as much as we can.
I'll say two things. During my 10 weeks, I trained pretty hard, but the one thing I was slightly concerned about was when I got to the furthest I've ever run. Mm-hmm. Though I thought if I believed that I could always get there, that I would. So for the 10 weeks, every single night and morning, probably every single minute I was in the community, I was like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to get there. No matter what, like if I roll my ankle, I'm going to get there. So that was one thing I was aware of. But my preparation, I didn't have the GPX file. I wish I had. I went off course, and I wasn't too bothered. Like, I dropped it pretty quickly. I was surprised how quickly I dropped it. And then at the end of the race, it hurt, but I was surprised how upbeat I was. What's happening there for me? I didn't put any thought or reflection into it, but is that just habit or from previous experiences? What's happening with my mindset there?
Yeah, so just briefly on what you've mentioned there, if we're trying to connect dots and make threads for that kind of event moment where frustration event kind of gone wrong direction, added distance, etc. There's a frustration attached to that. The potentially the reason why it was moved on so quickly for you as an individual could be just the coping skills that you developed over being a player, being able to navigate. That's happened. Let's move on. Let's go again. Let's keep going. But the other thread might be, as you alluded to, some of that prep that you did, and then 10 weeks to remind yourself each morning. Just get to the end. You're not putting a time stamp on what the expectation is, what the goal is. For you, it was just get to the end. So you've had that bit of a hiccup. We've gone in the wrong direction. It doesn't actually change that goal that you had for yourself, because you still just want to get to the end. It's almost that freedom that goes for you in that situation. It doesn't matter how we get there. It doesn't matter what occurs along the way. Getting to the finish line is the goal in itself. Nothing else matters. And sometimes that's a really powerful position to be in for an athlete to go, this is the goal. This is where I'd like to get to. It doesn't really matter how we get there. If we go really topical, we could speak about the England game yesterday and say, again, you're looking at them qualifying for a quarter-final. They will have frustrations about how they performed internally within the camp. They will have strengths in the performance as well. People will probably disagree with that, but there will be things that they will have done well and execute it. And it comes down to a point that goes, their goal for that game was to get through to the next round. And they have done that. You could have played brilliantly and been knocked out. Some people will have wanted that, but realistically, they want to get to the final. They want to win it. And it's just achieving what that next level requires of you. Sometimes it's going to be really pretty and you can do everything you want it. Sometimes it's going to be a really gritty, grim and bearish job, and it's not going to be pretty at all. But it's understanding what's that line that we need to cross, and let's just drag ourselves over that. And you could look on last night and go, they'll be satisfied this morning. They won't be happy with it, but they'll be satisfied that they've done what they needed to get to the next level. And
Okay.
again, you will have reflections on your run to then go, well, I'm happy with this bit, I'm not happy with this. It gives me things to work on next time to finesse that performance.
Okay, sticking a little bit with football, because I know you're doing quite a bit with the refs and things. What happens when the feedback is, say, 90% negative and you've got the media? No, it doesn't have to be a ref, but a player as well. How do they deal with the media or the negative load at that point?
Yeah, so this is always fascinating. This is a bit that I've loved supporting people to do as well. Again, we can't stop things being said. I think that's a really important position for anyone to be in. That people are going to criticize what you do, irrespective of what you do. There's always going to be negative voices. Sometimes that might be one person, sometimes it could be 50,000 all at the same time, but they're still going to say something at some point. The bit to focus on is trying not to silence that. Yeah, you could say ignore it. It becomes really difficult to ignore sometimes. And trying to again take yourself off social media, for example. Yeah, but then you lose some of the positive aspects of social media. So it's understanding a lot of the athletes that I end up working with and supporting in this regard. We have conversations about whose voice matters. So we can't stop all these voices happening. People will find us to criticize us. People will not like what I've said so far. But for me, it's working out whose voice actually matters. So again, going back to students, going back to young athletes, the way I pitch this is that if you had a remote control and the remote controlled the emotions that you felt, for example, so you could push a button, you feel happy, you push a button, you feel sad, etc., etc. 20 different buttons on that. Let's say that existed and that was a thing. My big question to young performers is, who would you give that remote to? Who would you trust with that remote if they could choose how you felt? And they might write a couple of people, naturally might write close family, they might write a couple of friends. It might be their coach, depending on kind of relationships. It might be people wider afield at high levels. It might be agents, things like that. But there'll be a small list. People will probably be surprised at how short that list would be. And the important impact of that as a bit of a thought exercise activity is going, okay, so if people are on that list and people are saying things who are on that list, it shows that their opinion of you is important to you. They've got your best intentions at heart, usually, because they're really close. They care about you as a person. If people aren't on that list, it's asking yourself the question of going, is their opinion valuable? Does their opinion matter? Importantly, do they actually have my best interests at heart? This is where we come onto social media. Do people on social media actually care about me, or are they saying it out of spite? Are they saying it out of jealousy? Are they saying it to get a reaction and to be purely negative? So if that's their intention, then why would I listen to that? I can't stop them saying it. Some of the words might hurt, but it's that understanding of going, do they actually care about me? We can all say what we want about the England camp, but guaranteed they will care about the people that are in the room. They might care about opinions of close family, and that's about it. The national media can say whatever they want. We can sit here and say whatever we want. They won't care about our opinion.
Okay. What happens when it's a family member on that list and the negativity comes in?
So, great question. I like where you go with these exploratory questions. Again, they're on the list because they care about how you feel, or you feel like they care about how you feel. Sometimes we have to be critical. Sometimes we have to be direct and to the point. Again, it's thinking about what was said. Is it that it's coming from a place of support and value? It might not be what I want to hear, but it might be that there's some really valuable information in that. And if I completely disregard it, I lose some of the value that might have been helpful. Rather than just go, oh, no, you're not being nice to me, I'm not going to listen. But what happens if the advice, even if delivered badly, is crucial and we've missed that gem? If there isn't that value when you've filtered through what the message was, and it has come from a position of pure negativity, let's say, again, it's asking yourself, if this is someone that I know cares about me, Again, maybe it was just they were caught up in their own emotions in that moment, and I just became a target. You mentioned about refs. A lot of the time, they're a really nice target for frustrations that people have, because you're not going to be critical of your own team. Therefore, the ref becomes the next easy target. That within a stadium, there aren't many in the stadium that are actually cheering on the refs, let's say. So yeah, it's helping them understand, again, if they're receiving that feedback, where's it coming from? Is it coming from a position of you're an easy target? Is it that people genuinely care and have delivered the message badly? Or is it that these people are actually just out to harm, and they're not in this trusted group that you have? They're not someone you would give that remote to.
Okay, deeper here. Say your wife, help me decode this one. Say your wife says, "Why are you doing that race? You shouldn't do that race." What's happening?
It sounds like a direct quote. Are we turning into a counselling session now? Again, sometimes people ask questions, well or badly phrased, that are genuinely coming from a position of just not understanding. And I think that's important. Sometimes people can say something that might affect us, that might cause us to question our judgment on a situation, might cause us to question what we're really doing. But it's coming from a position where they just don't know why. They're just asking. For example, take your situation there. If someone's asking, why are you doing that event? Like, what's the point? What's the purpose? You're going to put yourself through a lot. What's the upside? It's you hopefully having a good answer to that. If you don't have a good answer to that, sit and reflect on why you're actually doing it and find out what the reason was. Because undoubtedly that'll be a good driver of your performance later on when times get tough in that event. You need them reasons to remind yourself, why am I doing this? The soul searching isn't good to do on mile 37. You need to do it in the weeks leading up to the event. So yeah, it's thinking of those, and again, understanding that people will ask questions because they simply don't know, or you've not made it clear, and that's your opportunity to state where you stand on it, to give them some insight, and to ask yourself and gain clarity for yourself of, this is truly why I'm doing it, this is why I'm passionate about it. And if you do it, you have a really good reason and you tell someone that, it'll come through in what you say. They'll be able to feel that passion that you've got for it, and even if they don't agree, they'll see that you actually really care about doing whatever this thing is. And sometimes they'll buy into that, just going, I don't need to know why, because it still doesn't make sense. But I can see you're excited about it. I can see it matters, and I'll get behind that.
Cool. Well, I'm just conscious of how much time we've got left. Is there any advice you'd like to share with our listeners just as we sort of close out?
Yeah, I think if nothing else, I'll just emphasize that key foundation point I made earlier of having that open communication, of just having that communication line. Again, not that you have to parent in a certain way because everyone's different. Not that your child's going to want the same things because, again, every child's going to be different, and each sport has its own nuances as well. But it's just having that line of communication to ask when appropriate, and provide reflective space for your child to hopefully better understand themselves. Because really, that's what parenting is about. That's what I'm learning about it with a 2.5-year-old. It's about helping them learn, and the best way that we can sometimes help them learn is by asking them questions so that they can do the self-discovery. What I end up doing as a psychologist in sessions with clients, I'm not telling them the answers, I'm helping them explore their own experiences, because they're an expert in their space, they're an expert in their own lives. It's not for me to say how you to live your life, it's for me to help you explore what works for you. And exactly the same from a parenting perspective. Just ask good questions, give them space to reflect, and be supportive. If nothing else, wear the parent hat, don't wear the coach hat, because they've already got coaches a lot of the time. But wear the parenting one, because if you're not wearing that, no one else is going to pick that hat up and parent your child in those moments. You need to be the one that's running that role.
Okay, just can you tell me 2 good questions I should be asking them? What What are they?
How did you think the performance went? And what are you basing that on?
Okay, brilliant. Well, Ryan, mate, I really, really enjoyed that. I know we're just about out of time. So where can we find more about you, and can we find you on any social channels?
Yeah, so best place is website, which is just my name, ryanpelling.co.uk and .com. It'll come on both. And again, LinkedIn, kind of Instagram, Twitter, the usuals. Developing some bits as well at the moment, so hopefully they'll come through. But yeah, just website, and more than comfortable for people to reach out if they want to ask questions, if they want to inquire about support. If they just want to, again, tell me how well or how badly this came across, and that's absolutely fine, because I can't go through all this and say we have to be accepting and listening to feedback and open to feedback, and then be dismissive of feedback, let's say. So yeah, no, ryanpelling.co.uk, best place to find me, and like I say, I wish you all well in your parenting journeys as well.
Awesome. No, Ryan, thank you very much. You've been an absolute legend. If you're listening today to Ryan and myself, there's a link below to our Ultra Dad community. It's free. You can come along and find a number of supportive dads who enjoy a challenge and love to look after themselves, but also want to be better dads and be better people. So again, Ryan, thank you very much. And to you, the listener, thank you.